All right, okay, thanks. Up next we have Roderick Pachano and George Lameboy going to talk about the task force for wildlife and habitat that happened in Shasta. Sit here.
Hi, Jack. Oh, sorry. I am leaving my chairperson of the Wildlife Board hat over there. We are the representatives of the Wildlife Habitat Task Force established by the Cree Nation of Tsesibi. We have our colleague, Mr. Louis Canadu out there. Also part of the task force. We have basically finished our mandate, made the presentation, the report to the Cree Nation of Tsesibi. What we'd like to do is share a bit of our work and the process that we think would be invaluable to the establishment of a consortium. You know that people are technically challenged. I'm not even there. I'm technically inept, so I need somebody to push the screens. So what we're going to talk about is basically two things. What the task force did in relation to the wildlife habitat and two recommendations that came out of that. You know that we all know that the ecology of Hudson's Bay and James Bay is very complex, having evolved since the last ice age to what it was prior to anthropogenic activities, primarily in the vast watershed. Development of the natural resources in the watershed is varied, and it's things like communities, forestry, mining, major hydroelectric development being the major ones. It's probably correct to say that the major developments were carried out without any impact assessments. There's been no ongoing monitoring or assessments of the impacts of these activities. And there is no scientific studies assessing Hudson's Bay and James Bay and the environment prior to these major anthropogenic activities. Even nowadays, impact assessments are carried out only at the site of the planned developments. So we might ask ourselves, what ecological information is there of the past? And if there is information, where is it and how do we acquire it? It is with the people, the holders of the traditional ecological knowledge. That is where we will find this. That is where we'll find the information and the understanding prior to these impacts. And we will give you the example of the work of the Wildlife Habitat Task Force established by the Cree Nation of Tsesibi. Its mandate was to research the causes in the dramatic change of eelgrass in the last few years and to make recommendations for its revival. When we started, we quickly found out, and we knew this was going to happen, that there was absolutely no scientific data that we could find. So we went to the Cree for their knowledge and understanding. This is where the task force began its research, complementing this with scientific data in other areas. Scientific data confirmed what the Cree knew and understood with what was happening to this particular aspect of the ecology. As one Cree stated, the land does not lie. That is so true. The task force has gone as far as it could, but one of its recommendations is that a comprehensive research program be carried out to determine the factors causing this dramatic change. There was a memorandum of understanding entered into between the Cree Nation government and Hydro-Quebec on the follow-up to these studies that were recommended by the task force. And there's a steering committee that was created composed of the following entities: the Cree Nation government, Hydro-Quebec, the Cree Nation of Tsesibi, Skoon Corporation, and hopefully other governmental entities and agencies. There is an agreement amongst the steering committee that the basis upon which the scientific research will be carried out is Cree knowledge. And here we're talking about a 3-year research program. The major factors which will be further researched are in respect to the wildlife habitat, in particular eelgrass, and the decline of eelgrass, are salinity, turbidity, nutrients, water temperature, and sedimentation. The changes in the eelgrass growth occurred after the hydroelectric developments project was put into operation. And it was the people that noticed these changes because they were the ones that were users of the land and of the territory. And the animals, particularly the migratory birds that used these resources or these habitats, that changed. And nobody really took it upon themselves to find out what caused this. So the Cree Nation of Tsesibi, upon the recommendation of the people of Tsesibi, undertook to find out, to do some research themselves, to begin the process. In that report that we have prepared, we do not point a finger as to who caused all these changes, but the evidence and the facts speak for themselves. This research that is just started, I guess, should confirm Cree knowledge of the factors causing this change, because the Cree have an understanding of what happened and why things are happening the way they have happened since then. Once that is known and these facts are agreed upon, then decisions can be made on how the ecology may be restored or remedied. And I think this was one of the important things that the people have identified, that the most important principle to wildlife management is habitat preservation. So when we look at what happened there in the particular case, just one part of the ecology being eelgrass, it impacts a lot of animals, fish, wildlife, and migratory birds, all the way up to the top of the food chain, and that's man. So you will understand that anywhere, any place with any species, habitat preservation is important. We will not have animals and wildlife where they were before if that is changed, if the habitat is not preserved, it's not protected. And who is ultimately responsible for this, I guess, is the question that's left. There are many government departments and agencies who should assume their legal responsibilities to ensure that what should be done is done, as there are consequences for inaction. And I guess we'll go to the second part of the presentation, and that's the wildlife, the Community Research Institute, the second recommendation, or another one of the recommendations of the Wildlife Board, or the task force.
Yeah.